Whether you eat lunch at home most days or you want packable options to take to work or school, I bet you're always eager for new ideas to shake up your lunchtime routine. Today I have 3 that are family friendly, and the best news is they're as healthy as they are delicious. So our first recipe today is super family friendly. They really all are. And this one is based on many families' favorite food, pizza, but it's kind of with a twist. What we're going to do is stuff these zucchinis, create little boats out of them, and put pizza toppings in and on them. So we're going to start by making our zucchini boats, and we do that by just cutting off the ends. I've already washed them. And then we're going to split them in half lengthwise. And you can make one half if you want, or you could make multiples, whatever you need to feed your family. Now we want to scoop out some of the flesh on the inside to make room for our pizza fillings. The easiest way to do this is with a melon baller. If you don't have one, regular old spoon works just fine too. And the one trick is you want to try and not pierce the green skin, but if you do, it's not a big crisis. So I'm just going to scoop out some rounds. You can see how easy it is because the flesh is so tender, and it doesn't have to be smooth on the inside. Those little ridges in there between scoops are just fine to leave. The more you start to try and clean it up, the greater the likelihood that you're going to puncture it. And we'll just do that with the others. Now you can see I'm reserving the zucchini that I'm pulling out here. My plan for this is I'm going to chop it up and add it to the next batch of soup that I make. I really try to make sure that any vegetable bits that don't make it into one dish are not wasted and simply put in the compost. I could similarly add it to a pasta sauce, for example. All right, our zucchinis are prepped. Now we're going to get the pizza toppings ready. So we've got our skillet here on heat, and we're going to add a little bit of olive oil. And while that's heating, we're going to chop up our vegetables. You can, of course, use whatever pizza toppings your family likes. And honestly, if they just want sauce and cheese, there's nothing wrong with that. I happen to like mine with a lot of veggies. You want to cut them up fairly small because they're going to be nestled into the little zucchini boats. So if they're too big, they're not going to fit. There we go. Kind of manhandle those mushrooms, but they're all set. And I would say for 4 boats or 2 zucchinis, you probably want about 1/3 cup of each topping, and that should work out to be about the right amount. I'm using a sweet onion here because it's only going to be cooked really briefly, and I don't want it to have a really harsh raw onion taste in my pizza. You could use green onions if that's something that you have on hand and need to use up. And of course, olives, artichokes, even pineapple for you pineapple aficionados. And I really like green pepper on my pizza, so that's going into the mix too. All right, all of these into the pan. And they're just going to need a couple of minutes just to soften. I know we often put raw vegetables on top of pizzas, but they're going into a super hot oven and for enough time to actually cook the dough. So in this case, we don't need to cook the zucchinis per se. We just really want to get them softened and tenderized. All right, I think we're all set now with those vegetables. So I'm going to add my pepperoni in. And then we're going to add the pizza sauce right into the pan. And again, it's about 1/3 cup of sauce, so everything's in fairly equal proportion. And I'm just going to give that a little stir. So you want it to be saucy, but not swimming in sauce. Otherwise, it's just not going to firm up in the zucchini boats. All right, so we're going to place our zucchini on a parchment-lined baking tray. I like using parchment because it means I don't have to wash the tray afterwards. The cheese won't get stuck on it, that sort of thing. And now I'm just going to pick each one up, and we'll divide the filling evenly among the 4 boats. And you can always go back and top them up. I don't want to run out before I get to the last one. If you did have extra filling left over, you could freeze it and then add it to the next batch, or toss it in a pasta sauce. All right, our last step is that we're going to put the cheese on top, and I've got just great old mozzarella here because that's what I like on my pizza. You could lay slices of cheese on top if you want to really blanket them. I just like to be able to see the zucchini and the toppings underneath. That's why I don't want to do slices myself. And you can see the cheese is spilling over a little tiny bit, hence the need for the parchment paper. All right, I'm going to pop this tray in the oven, and it should take about 15 to 18 minutes, so we'll check it at the 15-minute mark and see if the zucchini is tender. All right, we've got our zucchini boats out of the oven, and oh my gosh, they smell fantastic. Look at that melty cheese, so good. I'm going to let them cool for a second, and I'm going to chop up a little fresh basil to scatter on top because I really like that on any kind of pizza. And if I haven't shown you this trick before, best way is to roll it up, just like the way they make Cuban cigars, believe it or not. And then you can cut it into strips. There we go. We'll put them on our serving tray. They are hot, but they look so good. And these are delicious at room temperature as well, which makes them a great lunchbox option. But they also reheat really nicely too. We're told that odd-numbered groupings look better, so that's why you've got 3 on your plate here. There we go. Our pizza zucchini boats are ready to be devoured.
Up next, I'm going to show you how to make something that is great as a dessert or a snack. I find it's a great addition to brunch menus too. It's based on one of my favorite Vietnamese dishes, rice paper rolls, but the fresh, sweet filling may surprise you.
The next time you need to soften some butter in a hurry and don't want to make another butter puddle in your microwave, here's a hot tip. Simply run a drinking glass or a jar under really hot running water, dry it, then place it over your butter, let it sit for a couple of minutes, and you will have perfectly softened butter. I love eating fruit, but not everyone in my family feels the same way, so I'm constantly looking for new ways to present it to them that can get them excited about it. And let me tell you, when you wrap them in rice paper and serve a killer dipping sauce, there's no end to the amount of fruit that they'll eat. So that's what we're going to make today. So we're going to start by making our dipping sauce. I've got some warmed honey here in this jar. You could use maple syrup if you prefer, but I really like honey for this. And then I've got a jalapeno, which I blistered using a kitchen torch. If you have a gas stove, you can hold it with tongs over the flame and do it that way. You can do it on a barbecue. You could even just do it in the oven on a baking tray. And we like the blistering because we get a better flavor from that. So I'm just going to cut off 2 pieces of this and pop it in with the honey. And then we're going to add some lime juice. And the combo of the jalapeno and lime is just so great. You're kind of going for that sweet spiciness that is common in a lot of Asian cuisines. I think that's going to be enough. There we go. And now what we're going to do is we're going to muddle it together, and that's a term you see a lot in cocktail recipes. You basically just want to mush the jalapeno to get some of the essence out of it. And we're going to strain it, so don't worry about the seeds being in there and it being too hot. So it just needs a few pokes until you see that the color has changed in the liquid, and we've got that going on. And now I'm just going to strain it into a little serving dish and set it aside. There we go. Our dipping sauce is all ready. So next up, we're going to get the fruit to go on the inside of the rolls ready. So I'm going to start with an apple. And when I cut the apple, I'm going to put it into this mixture of water and a bit of lime juice. So that will keep it from browning as it sits in the rolls. And that's important if you're not going to be eating them right away. And I was taught to always cut the apple in half and carefully cut the core out. I don't have time for that anymore. I'm just going to make 4 cuts around the core. And depending on how big it is, I might need to do a speck of trimming. But you really don't lose too much of the apple, and it's way faster. So this one, I just have to cut out 1 tiny bit of core. And the same with this one. And we're not going to peel them because we want to have a nice crisp texture in our rolls. So I'm just going to slice them. You can use any apple you like. I like Galas as I find that they keep their texture really well. Macintosh would be great. Cortland's, really whatever you have on hand. This is probably more than we need for the few rolls we're going to make, but you can make a really big batch of these and cover and refrigerate them until you need them. There we go. So our apples are getting soaked with citrus so that they won't go brown. We'll just set those aside. And now we're going to add in some melon. I really like cantaloupe. Honeydew would be good for this as well. I'm just going to cut a few slices and then I'm going to cut the rinds off. If you have too many large pieces of fruit, it's going to be really hard to wrap them up. And the cantaloupe won't go brown, so there's no need to soak it. There we go. And last but not least, I'm going to add in some strawberries for the flavor and also the nice pop of color. There we go. Now sometimes when I make these, I'll use lettuce leaves as well if I want to make them a bit more substantial, but this time we're going all fruit because that's the way I really like them best. So I've got a work surface here. This is so you can probably see what I'm doing a little bit better. And I'm going to dry my apple slices. You don't want things too soggy going in. And you can, of course, vary the fruit. Raspberries would be great. Blueberries are a little tricky because they really want to run away. Blackberries would be really nice. Banana would be great. With banana, you probably have to eat them a little sooner because it can go mushy. There we go. I think that's probably enough of our apple. All right, so I've got these adorable little 6-inch rice paper wrappers. If you can find these, they're fantastic for this. Otherwise, you can use the 8 or 10-inch ones, just whatever you can find. So I'm going to start by soaking it in warm water. And you want to soak it just long enough so it becomes pliable. Depending on the temperature of your water, it'll take anywhere from 10 to 30 seconds. And if you don't soak it, you're never going to be able to manipulate it to fold it. So you really have to, it's impossible to make these without this step. Okay. If you leave it soaking too long, it's going to kind of fall apart when you try to lift it out. So you have to find that sweet spot. My water's not too warm, so it's taking a little longer than I had planned. All right, so now I've got it on the circle, still kind of hard to see, but I'm going to lay down some apples. Then I'm going to add some melon. And then a couple of strawberry slices. And when you go to roll it up, it's just like a burrito. You want to do it from the bottom first, and then from the sides, kind of tucking the fruit in as you go, and then you just keep rolling. And there we go, there's one done. So we'll do another one. The lettuce can hide the visual on the fruit, so that's the other reason that I chose not to use it today. These will continue to soften after you take them out of the water, so you just kind of have to get the feel of them after you've done a couple. I'm going to put the next one into soak while I work on this one. All right. I like the apple for the bottom just because it's a nice sturdy base. And again, we'll go from the bottom, then the sides, and then roll. And you do want to, as I said, hold on to the fruit so it doesn't try and sneak out on you. So we get them on the platter. Then we've got our dipping sauce. And our fruit salad rolls are going to be a big hit, I'm certain.
Much like the previous recipe, my next one is versatile as a breakfast, brunch, or lunch item, plus it's great for snacking too. With fruit, oats, and nuts, these squares are both family-friendly and healthy, and best of all, they freeze well, so they'll make a terrific grab-and-go option for busy people.
I mentioned earlier that my family sometimes needs a little persuasion to eat fruit. This next recipe is another one that works really, really well on them. So to make our apple crisp squares, we're going to start by making the crumble crust that you normally associate with being on top of an apple crisp. So we're going to combine some all-purpose flour. It's easy to remember this recipe because it's 3/4 cup of everything. Those are just regular rolled oats, not instant, but the regular minute oats, and some brown sugar. And then we've got equal parts of baking soda and baking powder that we're going to sprinkle in. You can see I left a little sugar behind. We'll get that out. And I'm just going to stir this to break up any clumps of brown sugar that are in there. If you have any that are really persistent, you can just reach in with your fingers. The disadvantage of leaving the clumps is that they kind of melt in a lump in your dish, and you can have sort of gooey spots that don't bake evenly. All right, that's looking pretty good to me. Just a few last lumps to flatten with my spoon here. Now I'm going to add in some slivered almonds. I like them for the bit of extra crunch, and also it's some protein in the dish. If you don't prefer almonds or you need to make it nut-free, you can obviously omit them, and it won't affect the texture in any way. Whoops. Now we're going to stir those in. And last but not least, we need something to help it hold together, so I've got 1/2 cup of melted butter here. Just going to drizzle that in. And like lots of baked goods, these freeze really well. So it's great to have a batch tucked away, and then you can just pull out a couple to tuck into a lunchbox or for a grab-and-go breakfast. It's a little more sugar than I might ordinarily offer for breakfast, but in a pinch, it's better than a commercial granola bar. And that's sort of what they remind me of. And my goal here now is to stir just enough so that everything gets softened and moistened with the butter. You don't want to have any dry bits in the bottom. For this recipe, I sometimes make a batch of this crumble mixture and just tuck it in the freezer. And then when I want to make the squares in a hurry, this part's already done. And it just needs a couple of minutes to thaw before you can proceed with the recipe. Okay, I'm happy with that. So now we're going to put the bottom crust in our prepared pan. And you'll notice that my parchment paper is all wrinkly. I actually crumpled it up in a ball, ran it under hot water, and shook the water off, and then it made it very pliable to pop into my pan. I did this earlier this morning, and it holds the shape of the pan, so much better than trying to pleat and fold it to get it to stay. So 1/2 of the mixture's going in. And you just have to eyeball it. It doesn't have to be exact. And now I'm going to press that down to form my bottom crust. And just make sure you get into the corners. I think I can take one more scoop here. There we go. 1.5. And the reason for pressing it firmly is you want a crust that is robust enough to hold up the apple layer and the crumble topping. And I'm just trying to get right into the corners too. All right, our crust is ready. I'm going to pop this in the oven for about 10 to 12 minutes until it has puffed a little bit and is nice and golden brown. All right, I've taken the crust out of the oven. It looks golden and perfect and nicely puffed. So now we're going to make the apple layer that goes on top of that. So again, I have my favorite Gala apple just because that's what I really like. And for this recipe, we are going to peel the apple because we want it to soften thoroughly in between the two layers of crumble. And you want about 1.5 cups of apple, so that's equivalent to 1 large apple. Obviously, you can use 2 smaller ones if need be. There isn't really a need to measure it, though. And again, I've got just a couple of little coarse bits from the core, so we'll pop those out. And you want to dice this fairly finely. The smaller the pieces are, the faster they'll cook. All right, there's our apple all set. Now we want to add some things in to not only enhance the apple flavor, but also to encourage it to get nice and soft while it's cooking. So we've got some lemon juice here, about 2 tablespoons. And some white sugar, I think that's about 3 tablespoons. Cinnamon, because that's what I love with apples. You could switch it up with ginger or nutmeg if you prefer. A little bit of flour to help it thicken as it releases juices. We'll give that a stir. Make sure that all the apples are coated. And finally, we're going to add in a little bit of melted butter. This has just solidified a little, so I'm going to sprinkle it on instead of pouring. You could use a little bit of coconut oil if you didn't want butter in this. I haven't experimented with making the crust without butter, but I'm sure that if that's something you're used to doing, you could figure it out no problem. All right, there's our yummy apple layer. So now we're going to put it on top of the base. And you just want to distribute it fairly evenly. It's nice if you don't have big bare spots without fruit. And make sure you scrape the bowl out well so you don't leave any of the good stuff behind. There we go. And I'm just going to move these around a little bit, like I said, to get that nice even coverage. That's a good looking layer of apples there. All right. And now we're going to take our reserved crumble topping. Just going to give it a stir. And then we're going to sprinkle that on top. I find this easiest to do with my fingers so that I can get into the corners and all the edges. And because of the butter in it, it's going to, the butter will melt and it'll work to draw all the ingredients together, and you'll have a nice solid top layer. There we go, nice even coverage on top. So this is going to go back into the oven for about, I would say 25 minutes or so. That's how long it's going to take for the apples to soften. In the meantime, let me show you what it looks like when it comes out of the oven. Here is the finished product, and oh my goodness, don't these look great? The apples in there with the cinnamon and so on. And you can see how easy it would be to just package these up and make someone's day by popping one of these into their lunchbox. While it can be tempting to make the same things all the time for lunch, I think you'll find that if you shake up your lunchtime routine, you're going to have great days every day. I encourage you to try these delicious fruit salad rice paper wraps, zucchini pizza boats, and apple crisp squares to make your midday meals a little bit more fun.